So, after literally weeks and weeks of waiting, the government has finally responded to our petition to end the badger cull. Spoiler alert, their response is exactly what we feared. Deeply disappointing. It ignores critical scientific evidence, recycles failed policies, and refuses to confront the truth about bovine TB. Today, I'm breaking down DEFRA's response into 6 reasons why it's an absolute joke. Reason 1. Ignoring key evidence against culling. Now, at the heart of our petition was reference to peer-reviewed research, including the groundbreaking studies by Torgerson and others, which show literally no evidence that badger culling reduces confirmed bovine TB in cattle. Let me repeat that. No evidence. Torgerson's work doesn't just poke holes in the government's rationale, it blows it wide open. It highlights that any localized reductions in TB are negligible, inconsistent, and often outweighed by the perturbation effect, where disrupting badger social groups spreads the disease further. And yet, the government's response? Silence. They don't respond to it at all. They conveniently ignore this critical evidence because admitting the truth would mean acknowledging they've been wrong for over a decade. And let's face it, no one in power wants to admit they've been barking up the wrong tree, especially when it might cost them their reputation or indeed their job. Reason 2, the laughable so-called step change claim. So in the response to our petition, the government talks about a step change in their TB eradication strategy, but let's call it what it really is. Lip service. Sure, they mention cattle vaccination and improved testing, but these aren't new ideas. They've literally been talking about them for years with barely any real progress. And while the government has decided not to pursue targeting culling proposals, they've quietly allowed all existing culling licenses from the previous government to continue. This effectively means literally tens of thousands more badgers will be slaughtered. How can you claim to be stepping away from culling when in reality you're letting it carry on unchecked? It's a perfect example of doublespeak, saying one thing while doing the exact opposite. In their response, they also talk about badger vaccination, which might sound quite logical at first glance, but it's still rooted in the flawed narrative that badgers are the main problem. You've got to remember that advocating for badger vaccination is just another way of saying, yeah, badgers are the villains here, when science clearly shows that cattle-to-cattle transmission is the primary issue here. This so-called step change is nothing more than putting old wine in new bottles. The animal agriculture industry, particularly the farming of cattle for profit, deserves harsh criticism for the appalling conditions in which cattle are kept. These animals are treated as mere commodities, valued only for their economic worth, and ultimately it is the demand for dairy that fuels the culling of badgers, a scapegoat solution to avoid addressing the real issues, as we demonstrated in this powerful short animation.
Badgers are being killed to protect the dairy industry. Learn more and help us end the badger cull today.
The truth is, poor hygiene and inadequate biosecurity measures on farms are major contributors to cattle transmission of TB. But instead of taking responsibility and implementing quite costly but necessary reforms to improve these conditions, it's just easier and cheaper for the industry to shift blame onto badgers. Reason 3, the painfully slow progress on cattle testing. Another thing that really gets under my skin is the painfully slow progress on improving cattle testing. Why is it that literally after all these years, farmers still can't access better tools, like more accurate feces-based tests, for instance, to detect TB in their herds?
Cows produce a lot of crap, and now we know that it's potentially infected crap. We tested our slurry. 1 gram of the slurry on Robert's farm was enough to infect a cow.
Yeah, that's
way too much.
That's a gram.
So this amount of slurry can infect a cow.
Is it because these tests might actually reveal just how widespread TB truly is. If that happened, of course, it would be a disaster for the government and the farming industry. They simply can't afford to admit that far more cattle probably have TB than the current numbers suggest, because of course it would cripple animal agriculture. So it's far easier and far cheaper to just keep blaming badgers. Reason 4, lobbyists and political pressure. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the NFU. How much influence do farming lobbyists have over these policies? Are they the ones actually pulling the strings behind the scenes? It's hard not to be cynical when you consider how long the NFU has pushed for badger culling, despite the lack of evidence that it works. And now, under Labour, it seems like the cull is continuing because no one wants to upset the farming lobby. It's such a sad state of affairs when policies are driven more by political pressure than by science or common sense. Reason 5, failing wildlife and wasting resources. The government has the audacity to somehow claim that their strategy will protect wildlife. Let's pause to appreciate this irony that over 230,000 badgers, a protected species, have been killed, devastating ecosystems and harming biodiversity. And now they're talking about badger population surveys and wildlife TB monitoring. Really? Wouldn't it have made more sense to do that research before killing hundreds of thousands of badgers? And don't even get me started on the cost. Millions of pounds have now been wasted on culling. Money that could have been far better spent on real solutions like improved cattle testing, better farm biosecurity, and speeding up cattle vaccination development. Quite frankly, the whole thing's a scandal. Reason 6, a missed opportunity for real change. This response was a chance for the government to finally show that they're serious about tackling bovine TB. Instead, they've doubled down on outdated policies that scapegoat badgers and leave cows to suffer. Ending the cull, focusing on better cattle testing, and tightening controls on cattle movements would be a game changer. But no, they've chosen to stick with a failing strategy because it's easier than admitting they've been wrong all along. The government's response fails on every level. It ignores the evidence, perpetuates a pointless policy, and will lead to the deaths of tens of thousands more badgers over the coming years. DEFRA's claim of a step change is farcical. The reality is that it's business as usual, driven by lobbyists and a complete refusal to face the facts. Badgers deserve better. Needless to say, we will keep fighting to get the truth out there and to pressure this Labour government to grow a backbone, stand up to the farming lobbyists, and finally do the right thing for all parties. So if you haven't already, please do add your name to the government petition. We recently surpassed 40,000 signatures. Show them we will never give up on this. If we can hit 100,000, it potentially secures a debate in Parliament. If you like what we do and would like to support Protect the Wild, please consider a small monthly donation to fund our vital work. We do absolutely everything we can to protect British wildlife from those out to destroy it. From undercover investigations and animations seen by millions of people to funding hunt sabotage and year-round journalism, we're building a powerful community of like-minded people, and I'd love you to be a part of it.